moment to thank Kevin and Ryan at Steinway for their generosity. MSMTA also thanks the following sponsors and donors: JG Piano Services, Parkside Credit Union, Trail West Bank, Christy Bradley, Missoula Bone and Joint, Stickney Piano Service, the University of Montana School of Music, Liquid Planet, Hodges Law Group, Twin Flower Music Studio and Kate Hansen, NCTM, John J. Matz, Lucas Scariano of Edward Jones, Morgan Roth Music, and the Doubletree Hilton Hotel for their generous support. This conference was funded in part by a grant from the Montana Arts Council, an agency of the state government, and our sessions today are being recorded by Missoula Community Access Television as part of a media assistance grant donated to MSMTA by MCAT. You'll see a gentleman in the back who's donated his time for today. Thank you very much. All right, with that, I would like to introduce our keynote presenter and guest artist for 2018. When Peter Takacs agreed to join us at this conference, there may have been some jumping up and down in my kitchen. I was very excited. Peter Takacs was born in Romania and began his studies before his 4th birthday. He performed his debut recital at age 7, and at age 14, he was admitted to the National Conservatory of Paris. After arriving in the United States, his outstanding musical talents were recognized with full scholarships to Northwestern University and the University of Illinois, and a 3-year doctoral studies fellowship at the Peabody Conservatory, where he studied under renowned pianist Leon Fleischer. Professor Takacs has received numerous prizes and awards for his performances, and he has performed as a guest soloist with major orchestras and at music festivals around the world. A Beethoven scholar, Mr. Takacs performed and recorded the complete cycle of Beethoven sonatas in 2011, and in 2015 he presented 3 recitals of Beethoven solo and chamber music at Carnegie Hall to critical acclaim. A gifted teacher, Professor Takacs' students have won top prizes in competitions throughout the US, Canada, Europe, and South Africa. He has served on the faculty of Oberlin Conservatory of Music since 1976. I'm deeply honored to welcome master teacher, acclaimed pianist, and our 2018 keynote presenter and guest artist, Peter Takacs.
Oh. Wow. Thanks, Jessica. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's lovely to see everybody. I want to thank Jessica in particular for an amazing organizational job. We've been going back and forth, but I feel completely taken care of. So thank you so much, Jessica. Lovely to see everybody. It's a good time to talk about Beethoven. I think it's always a good time to talk about Beethoven. But you probably know that the big 250th is coming up. So everybody get your, parties ready. His 250th will be in December 2020. We're planning a kind of a Beethoven semester at Oberlin in the fall of 2020, culminating on December 10th, 6 days before his birthday, with the 9th Symphony. So it's going to be very exciting, I think, all over the world. So I've talked about these sonatas a lot. This is my baby, which I recorded. It was released in 2011. It's a really wonderful set. The playing is okay, but the graphics and the way it's put together, it's really kind of fantastic. It's good. It's got a box of CDs. I'm not selling anything. I'm just showing you. There's 11 CDs here, including some of the early sonatas, which are extra from the 32. And each envelope has a CD with a picture on it. And the notes I mostly wrote myself, and it's kind of related to what I'm talking about today. So anyway, it's out there. It's kind of selling out. There are 2,500 made, and Amazon has to send you to Japan to get some. But they're still available here and there. And I have a few myself that I can bring tomorrow, perhaps. So it was a labor of love, for sure. So I hope you have 3 pieces of paper. One is a chronology, which is just kind of for information. And the other single sheet is kind of an outline of what I'm going to talk about. And then the third packet is the musical examples. So I don't want to spend too much time on the chronology, except that it's very interesting to look at it because we think about Beethoven as having three major periods, the early, middle, and late. But I think there's some periods in between. I call them transitional period 1, and on the back, number 2, where he was trying to think of a new way to approach composition. And those pieces, for example, in transitional 1, there's Moonlight Sonata. They are usually kind of introspective, and he's really not, one of the things I admire about him the most is that he was never really satisfied with what he was doing. He said, I have to think of a new way. So the early period was more or less based on Mozart and Haydn. Then there was a transitional period. Opus 26 is kind of a mellow sonata with variations, and then there's the Moonlight and the Pastoral. So they're a little bit more kind of reflective. And then the middle period starts, I think, mostly with the Tempest, where he's trying to think on a bigger scale. The middle period is generally called the Heroic, and it culminates in the two big sonatas that we all fear, the Waldstein and the Appassionata, where the whole scope of composition is just much, much larger. And it includes the Fifth Symphony, the Sixth Symphony. And then there's another transitional period. He writes a sonata in F sharp major, number 24, which is I don't know, maybe we don't want that. F sharp major is a very unusual key. I don't think there are any F sharp major sonatas before Liszt or Schumann. So he's experimenting. And then there's Les Adieux, which I'm going to play tomorrow night, which is based on a theme, the theme of the departure, the absence, and the return. So that's kind of a romantic idea of putting a story to a piece. That was kind of a debatable thing in the old days. Should we associate music with a program or a story? And a lot of people felt that that would cheapen the music. But this is kind of Beethoven's experiment with writing a three-part sonata on three parts of an experience that he had when his friend Archduke Rudolf had to leave Vienna. And then the late period usually is considered to start with Opus 101, which is a fantastic and very difficult sonata. And then there's the fearsome, the one that keeps us awake at night, Hammerklavier. Even the name is scary, right? And of course, the last three sonatas, which are a kind of culmination of his sonata writing. After 111, he got interested in other things. He was interested in the string quartets. He wrote the Missa Solemnis, which is a major religious work. He didn't stop writing for the piano, though. He wrote Bagatelles, Opus 119 and 126. And he wrote, of course, Diabelli Variations, Opus 120. Yeah, I don't know if you know the story of the Diabelli. There was a little theme, tigadam, pom pim, pogadam. And that was, Diabelli was a publisher, so he sent that theme to 50 composers. Said, could you write one variation for me? They will make a book out of it. So actually there were a lot of composers in Vienna, wrote one variation, including Liszt, who was 11 years old. And Schubert wrote one, very lovely. The other ones are more or less forgotten. And Beethoven said, I'm not going to write one variation. Don't waste my time. Plus, your theme is stupid. Because it's a tigadam, bumpy, it's not much. And then he started thinking about it. He said, it's a simple theme, so maybe I can do something. He wrote 33 variations of his own. That's the Diabelli. So there are 50 by 50 people, and there's 33 by Beethoven himself. So that's the end of his piano composition time. In thinking about learning all these pieces, I was about, about maybe 90. I had played maybe 12, 14 of them. And so at that point, you have to ask, I can just keep learning one at a time or just go all the way. So I decided to go all the way and learn the other. And there's some that I didn't know. I didn't know the Hammerklavier. I had never played Appassionata at that time. So I programmed 8 recitals, and I made some combination of programs, and I started practicing. I put the early one, in the early programs, I put the ones I knew, and then as it got later, they were the ones I didn't know. And it was, a really daunting experience, but also incredibly uplifting to delve into this music, in a deep way. So I played, the recitals were in 98, 99 at Oberlin, 4 in 98 and 4 in 99. And then I got a grant to go record them, so that took me quite a bit of time. But what began to be clear is that there's certain ideas that keep recurring in his thinking. He was, I already mentioned, he's completely impatient with getting settled. So he had kind of an urgent need to always break out and do new things. The other thing about Beethoven that's kind of a general thing is he was funny. He has a sense of humor. Mr. Arau, who's one of my idols, said, there's no humor in Beethoven. All Beethoven is serious, and it's not true. It's funny. Some of it. Kind of ha-ha German funny. So those are his characteristics, but I think he needed to always surprise, startle, and delight the listener. And he wrote that in a letter to his publisher. He said, what are you trying to accomplish with these pieces? I'm trying to surprise, startle, and delight. So that's kind of my first category there. And I have different ways that I think Beethoven found to surprise the listener, to attract attention, to sometimes, not really to shock, but to kind of have everybody be on the edge of their chair. So I may not do all of these examples because there's a lot, but one way that he did it was the way he started pieces. And the first example I have there is what's called a rocket theme. He liked to, this was not his invention. There were classical composers who liked rocket themes. Mozart liked it. Pum 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 in the G minor symphony. But Beethoven liked to use it at the beginning so that he could kind of get people to be suddenly excited, because there's something going up quickly. So the first sonata is Opus 2, number 1, has a rocket theme. It's in F minor, so it's kind of dramatic. Left hand. So that's a nice way to start his first sonata. He was like 25, and he wanted to prove himself to the Viennese. And the fifth sonata, Opus 10, number 1, he has a different kind of rocket. I call it a sputtering rocket because it goes like up and down. It's like ka-choo, 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 ka-choo. So it's a very, it still goes up, but it goes up zigzag. Very exciting. Sorry about the wrong notes. The seventh sonata, the D major, one of the greats, starts with a kind of rocket. It goes up sort of scale-wise by T, and then and later on, and then so nice way to start. What other kind of ways he has of attracting attention? Let's go to example. What's the next one? It's something I call quirky beginnings. It's a little lesser known sonata, Opus 31, number 1. It's supposed to be the first of the middle period, but it's kind of classical. But the concept here is quirky because the hands can't play together. And we all have students who can't get their hands together, right? So I think it's kind of funny. Okay, let's try it in F major. Nope. So that's kind of cute and funny. Second movement of that is very beautiful. But it's kind of a joke, I think. The next one that I have there is Opus 31, number 3. I like that beginning. It starts on a funny chord, and it's kind of like, I call it a question mark, because it's unresolved. It's kind of questioning. We don't know where it's going. It's really a fun sonata, Opus 31, number 3. So Tim-padam starts, I think it's a 2-6-5 chord. Ti-ta-dam. It's an F7 chord in E flat. I put words to it because I like to do that sometimes. I do it tomorrow too. I do it in German. So it's liebst du mich, ich liebe dich. Liebst du mich means do you love me, right? Liebst du mich. It's cute, I think. Nah. I mean, you know, he had his issues with women, but liebst du mich? Ich liebe dich. Ich liebe. Ich liebe dich. It's very nice. I'm not sure that's what he had in mind, but that's what I have in mind, so, you know. One more way to begin a piece that would just knock your socks off is the fearsome Hammerklavier. I've played it about 10 times, and I recorded it. I haven't played it anymore. It's just too hard, you know. There are young guys out there who can play it like without batting an eyelash. There's some people that I heard Marc-André Hamelin play the Hammerklavier, and it was like a walk in the park, you know. And I said, at least pretend that it's hard, for God's sake, you know. You know, a little sweat or something. But the beginning is what I call an explosion. Then it gets lyrical. But this is like it's like an earthquake or a volcanic eruption. So that's announcing that something pretty big is going to be happening, and it is. Let's see. This is what I call structural surprises. He was good at it. He was, of course, an amazing architect of music, the way he put the sonatas together. But he liked to tweak the edges. For example, a recap is always like coming home, right? It's like returning. So he liked to sometimes delay it or make it funny, like taking a detour. So this one here, it's from the nice Opus 10 number 2 sonata. Example 5, it's called false recapitulation, I call it. So it's a nice sonata. Very nice. One of the smaller ones. Then it goes into a development section. Then when it comes back, it's in the wrong key. So what you have there is the return in D major instead of, it goes. Everything is okay except you're in the wrong house. Then he says, whoops. Whoops. Ah. 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 Mommy, I'm home. So it's cute. Instead of F major, it comes back in D major. Then he has to kind of fool around to get back to F. The next one is similar, but I think it's a little bit more powerful, you know, because the idea of coming home is comforting one. But this one is, he's way far away from home. So to me, it's like, what do I call it? Looking for home. Yeah. This is Opus 7. Not played as much, a wonderful early sonata, 4 movements, a big one. Nice, healthy. And then at the recap, he gets completely lost. So it's got what key are we in now? A minor. That's A minor, and the piece is in E flat. So it's a tritone away in minor. So it's like completely out of it. And to me, there's a kind of desperation. And then so he uses the sonata form to create a psychological drama. And it's, I think it's very powerful and exciting. What am I doing here? It's over here. Too many papers. Let's put this down. What else have I got? Oh, yeah. Something called internal variations. Whenever he returns to something, he changes it. This one is, am I in the right place here? Let me see. Yep. This one is from Opus 10, number 3. It's one of my favorites. The last movement, I call it cat and mouse, because it's kind of skittish and feline of sorts. To me, it's like a cat. So it's kind of like you know, when a cat kind of sidles up to you, and then it's really cute. Every time that theme comes back, there's a variation. Like the next one over there, B, is instead of he plays. So he builds in little variations inside the movement. It's a rondo. So it makes it kind of interesting all the time. At the very end, he kind of gets kind of cat-like, I think. Goodbye. Gone, all right? Internal variations. And then the next one is kind of interesting. It's one of the smaller sonatas, Opus 54. It's sandwiched between Waldstein and Appassionata. So it's like a sandwich with 2 huge pieces of bread and maybe 1 slice of ham inside or something like that. It's a very sweet piece. This one is mentioned by Alfred Brendel in one of his essays. He calls it The Beauty and the Beast, this sonata, because it's a rondo as well. It's kind of a minuet. And the main theme is very, shall we say, feminine, very graceful, gentle. I don't want to get in trouble making any kind of stereotypes, but there's definitely something very elegant about him. maybe at some kind of ball, you know, and everybody's being very polite. Then the second theme, if you know it, Opus 54, is like this. It's not in an example, but it's completely brutal. Every beat has a sforzando, pop, 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 pop. So I suppose that's the beast part. So we have the Beauty and the Beast. So what happens in that movement is that every time the beauty or the lady comes back, it's a little bit less innocent. It's got little variations and it's little ornamentations. And so what's happening is that they're kind of, you know, corrupting each other. I call it corruption. And then by the end, they kind of walk off hand in hand. It's a Beauty and the Beast. And it's very peaceful, and the beast is completely domesticated. So instead of pop, 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 you have it there under C. It's really nice. Tom, papi. Tom, papi. One more scream, yum. And then it's over. So they're now boyfriend and girlfriend. But structurally speaking, they kind of, each one gets closer to the other until at the end they're melded together. This instead of, it's just purring along. Okay, so that one is a nice one. And Brendel likes it a lot. He calls it Beauty and the Beast Sonata. Now, so that's in a matter of structural surprises and how Beethoven used an accepted form to do different things, to create surprises and so on. It's cool. Under number 2, I have something called instrumental colors. I feel it's really important for us as musicians and teachers to always look at other works by the same composer. So with Beethoven, you have to know the symphonies, and you have to know the string quartets. It kind of makes us, enlarges our imaginative palette and so on. So Beethoven was a great orchestrator and a great symphonist. So I was wondering how his instrumental imagination colored his piano writing. So the most obvious example of that is the beginning of the 81A Sonata, because it starts, as you know, it starts with a horn call, right? It's kind of his friend leaving Vienna, and so there's this kind of court orchestra saying goodbye, and it puts little words on it. It says "Lebe wohl," which means "fare thee well." So I thought, that's music for 2 horns, obviously. So then it continues this way. It's really beautiful. But then, and then it goes up an octave. Then the horns come back. It's gorgeous. Deep feeling about his friend's departure. So I did something. I arranged this piece for horns, strings, and winds. And some students at Oberlin recorded it. So I have it here. This is probably a Montana premiere, I think. I hope. The playing is kind of so-so. We did it in a hurry. But let's see if the technology works. That's the next question. I think so. beautiful, right? Okay. So, I may have ruined it for you, but every time you play Les Adieux, it's a hard piece. You have to think about orchestration. Okay, that's Beethoven. And I don't think it's far-fetched. Obviously, the horns are the horns. The strings and the winds are my idea, but I think it works really well. I'm not going to go too much into the other effects. I think, for example, this piece, Opus 110, I think to me that's a wind quartet. Two clarinets and two oboes. I think it sounds great. And here, I have a clarinet solo with string accompaniment. He wrote a septet, Opus 20, which was a very famous piece, very popular in Vienna. And it's got a slow movement in A-flat with clarinet and strings, so it's like the same thing. So I don't think I'm going out on a limb too much. The only other thing I was thinking about instrumentation is when he writes symphonic music like to me that's string writing, vigorous string writing, like when you have it's hard to do. Some kids play it very well, but it's like it's definitely vigorous string writing. Or the end of third concerto, I'm playing it soon. It's it's orchestral string writing. So for Beethoven, we have to think orchestra, right? Sometimes. Now here's an aspect that actually not a lot of people think about. It's about his one opera. It's called Fidelio. He wanted to call it Leonora because it's about Leonora who dresses as a man and goes into prison to release her husband. But somebody else had written an opera just around then called Leonora. So he had to call it Fidelio instead. Fidelio is Leonora's name as a man, means the faithful one. And I think Beethoven, well, he had a lot of trouble with it. He was not a good opera composer. He was a great symphonist. He was not Mozart, let's say. Mozart was a genius of the theater. Beethoven struggled. He wanted to put so much in it, and he did. But a lot of his ideals about freedom and about injustice and about marital fidelity, of course, which he never had, but he tried. He always fell in love with somebody else's wife, but that's another story. But he put something of his soul into this piece, and I think it comes into the piano sonatas as well. So I want to play you one little snippet from the second act of Fidelio. Okay. Thank you, Carla, for making this easy for me. The first act is kind of almost like a comic opera, with Fidelio showing up at the prison, and then Marcellina falls in love with him. Like he's handsome, it's Leonora. And so there's all this stuff, but there's some beautiful things in it, like the prisoner's chorus when they come out of the darkness into the light. It's really quite moving, beautiful music. Male chorus. The second act starts in the dungeon, and it's completely dark, and you don't see anything. And there's a long orchestral introduction. And then some little ray of sun comes through some window up high, and you see that there's a prisoner there who's attached to a chain. And he sings this heartbreaking song of suffering. Ready? This is Ben Heppner, tenor. See if he comes up. It's a little lag there. Oh, I turned down the sound. That's why. his words are, at the beginning of the second act, things turn very dark. He says, Gott, wär's dunkel hier. He says, God, how dark it is in here. And the next thing he says is, such terrifying silence. So he's in the dungeon. This is followed by an aria of suffering, where he says, where I've been imprisoned, and then followed by an aria of hope. So I think that the Waldstein Sonata is his Fidelio Sonata, because it starts out in the low register. You have it there, example 9. Right? And the excerpt I have here, it tends to rise. You have a sorry. And then he's rising up. Then he's back in the darkness. And then it's a vision of hope, the last movement. He puts, it's cut off in your copy, but please write underneath pedal for the third movement, because it's very special. He says hold the pedal throughout, because he wants it to sound like there's an echo of sound, with the harmonies actually somewhat blurred. So it's an operatic scene, starting in the darkness and ending up in hope. It's really beautiful. Right? There are other places like that. I think 110 is similar with recitative. And he works his way through a recitative. And then he has the it's called Arioso Dolente, the aria of lament and suffering. So it's very deep stuff. But I do think that Fidelio kind of permeated his imagination, especially in the later works. Very powerful. And I think we all know about the recitative stuff. I had a German student once who wrote words for me for the recitative in The Tempest. I don't remember all the words. I think it's Ich bin verloren. That's his recap. And then, etc. So he inserts a recitative in the recap. You know, it's kind of amazing. Ich bin verloren means I've been abandoned. It's good words, I think. I don't know if Beethoven had words in mind. I think he did. But he never told us, so we don't know for sure. Let's see what we can do in the next 10 minutes. His love of nature was well known. He loved the Vienna countryside, so he used to walk around with a little notebook and write ideas down. While walking through the woods, he said, in every tree I see God, he said. To me, nature is divinity. So how does he express nature? Sometimes nature is peaceful and beautiful, like in the Pastoral Sonata. It's benevolent and pastoral, right? Other times it's a storm, right, which was partly his own sense of anxiety and anguish. I think the best storm sonata is the Appassionata. And I like to think about the beginning of it being kind of like, you know, before the storm sometimes there's like a green time when it feels like something's going to break pretty soon, but it feels scary. And to me, that's the beginning of Appassionata. Oops, no good. A little wind. It's kind of ominous, right? And of course, that's the storm. I love that. I can't play it, I have to practice, but it's like a bolt of lightning, right? Breaking out finally out of it. So to me, that's the real Tempest Sonata, although the Tempest is pretty tempestuous too. Let's see. Improvisation I like. Let's look at example 12. You know, because all these composers that we play were improvisers. They could sit down and do things off the top of their head. And what Beethoven did in the later pieces is he started putting the improvisation inside the piece itself. So this is from Opus 101. The first movement is very beautiful, kind of a fantasy type. Right. Then he's got a march for a second movement. He's got a pretty profound Fidelio-like third movement. It's not long. And then, in order to get to the fourth movement, he doesn't know how to get there. So he puts down his sketches. He says, well, let's go back to the first movement. That's example 12. And he stops. And he stops again. He repeats. Then he gets excited. Then he writes this very joyous last movement. So how does he get there? You see the little arrow there? When he plays, he says, I think I've got an idea, because he repeats it, and then he gets excited. And what is that theme? His last movement is, it's the same theme in Allegro. So it says, ooh. So you can see the little wheels turning in his brain, you know, say, I think I got something. It's really nice to see written down improvisation. It does the same thing in the Ninth Symphony where he goes through all the themes before the last movement. Before the Ode to Joy goes through the first movement, second movement, third movement, says, no. Not these sounds, friends. Let's go to something new. Ode to Joy. So it's the improviser in Beethoven. And one more thing, maybe the greatest, is what I call transcendence. I need this. Example 14. You know, how do you create musical transcendence? How did it go beyond? Kind of into a different world. This is 111. The first movement is quite stormy and passionate. dramatic C minor, his favorite drama key. Second movement, I think, is transcendent. It's a set of variations in C major. That's the basic key, right? He says, what does he say? Adagio molto semplice cantabile. So it's very simple, completely unadorned, just ultimate simplicity. And one of my favorite meters, which is 9/16, because it's 3 times 3. So it's it's kind of like a prayer, I think. So that's the basic theme. It has a little bit of similarity with the Diabelli, which is goes down a fourth, but it's a completely different feeling. Then he goes through a set of variations, different kind of rhythms. He returns to the theme, but this time it's in a low register. It's a B. And then my favorite spot is at C, where he returns to the theme, but instead of it comes back. And it's like a big river suddenly opening up. So it's a simple theme with water gushing all around it. It's completely exhilarating, that return. And then, I don't know if I can play the endings too hard, but at the end he builds up. And who would ever think of this? Have a trill on top, have triplets on the bottom, and in between is the theme. I mean, it's like incredible. And that's the end of his last sonata, and it creates this feeling of eternity somehow with the trill on top, the triplets on the bottom, and the theme in between, in pianissimo. So it's a long way to come from Opus 2 number 1 to Opus 111, but it's definitely a journey worth taking. So thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. I don't know if there are any questions or thoughts. It's okay. Yeah.
Just through all of this, I'm just curious, how do you start approaching Beethoven? Because it seems like Beethoven, I don't know, it's almost like a search for that musical brightness. Like, how do you kind of see what he wrote and how do you really interpret it?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, how do you enter that world? You know, I mean, some of the things I talked about are helpful. You know, the love of nature. You know, storminess versus peacefulness. You know, of course, you have to look at the early guys, Mozart and Haydn. You know, they were the starting point. So it's good to know classical style as such. You know, to understand articulation and sonata form and all those kinds of things. Yeah, it's a big leap into a big pond. You know. Have you played any Beethoven sonatas? The first one, yeah. So in the early days, he liked to publish things in sets of 3 because he was a good seller. And each one had a different character. So he was a pretty good salesman, you know, and because he knew that in order for people to buy his music, it had to be interesting. It has to be difficult, but not so difficult it's not playable. Later on, he didn't care so much. But usually in the three sonatas, there was a kind of a stormy one, like I think the first one. And then the middle one is, Opus 2 number 2 is A major, a little bit sunnier. And then the third one was usually a virtuoso show-off piece. That's Opus 2 number 3. So he liked to have different types of pieces within the opus. And he's got Opus 2, then Opus 10 is the C minor one, also stormy. Second one is the F major, pom pom, a little simpler. And the third one is D major, which is a, so he had types of pieces. So you have to figure out what he was trying to create in each piece. You know, I think stormy, relatively simple, and then brilliant and virtuoso. Later on, they began to be kind of singular. You know, each one has its own word. Like Waldstein is a special piece, very big. The first movement of Waldstein is kind of like a brilliant C major piece. Second and third are Fidelio for me, you know, that world. So, you know, you have to kind of decide to step into the big pond, or into the Pacific maybe, and just keep going deeper and deeper. Don't drown, but, you know, thanks for the question. Yeah. Yes? Well, that's a good question. I love Opus 10 number 3, D major. Slow movement is amazing. It's so, you love it too? Yeah. It's a bit Fidelio. And then it's a kind of an aria. So of the early ones, I'd say Opus 10 number 3. I've played Waldstein a lot, means a lot to me. And one more, 111. I think it's the Mount Olympus, I really do. I think it's the peak of his piano writing, absolutely. Yeah?
Are there any specific sonatas that you think sound better on other instruments?
Are you talking about like...
Yeah, I guess other keyboards or even more on the orchestral side.
Ah, that's interesting. That's a good question. Well, the early ones probably sound okay on historical instruments, like on a Mozart-type forte piano, because it's very transparent and you can hear everything. He had a big piano in the 20s. It was a Graf, which was kind of it was Schubert used it too. Are there any that are particularly symphonic? I think first movement of Waldstein is pretty symphonic. Starts with the low strings, maybe. And then flute, maybe. Oboe, flute. Strings, I think that could be string playing, you know, the kind of that they can do so well. So easy for them, hard for us. So I think that's kind of symphonic. Waldstein, not the second and third so much. Those are more pianistic. And then there are some that sound more like wind instruments, like 110. I think they're pianistic, but it's nice to have instrumental color. Okay, thank you so much. I'll see you all tomorrow some more. I'm kind of doing a lot around here. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.